Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by LaunchDarkly and AWS. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. Before we dive into today's session, I have just a couple of notes to review with you. First, we are recording our session today. So if you miss any of our discussion, if you'd like to watch again later, or if you'd like to share this with the rest of your team, we'll be sure to email you a copy of the recording shortly after we conclude this live session. Now, if you'd like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to do so. Your first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you're joining from today. If you have specific questions, we do want you to submit those to the Q&A panel that's also on the right side of your screen. Sending those questions to the Q&A helps us better keep track of them, and we'd really like to answer as many of your questions as we can. So please do send those in when you have them, and we'll do our best. Additionally, we will have 2 polls that we'll be launching throughout our program, so keep an eye out for those as they pop up on your screen. You'll also find on the left side that there are a whole bunch of additional resources for you, so feel free to check those out while you're here with us today. And finally, we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So thank you in advance for your chats and your questions. But if you also fill out our host webinar survey, that's going to be in the handouts, and I'll post it in the chat toward the end of our session. That will also make you eligible. So to dive right into our topic today, we are accelerating AI innovation, unlocking the power of generative AI with LaunchDarkly and Amazon Bedrock. I'm joined today by Cody D'Arkland, Senior Director of Product Innovation at Incubation at LaunchDarkly. And I'm also joined today by David Min, Senior Partner Success SA at Amazon. So Cody, David, thank you both so much for joining us here on Techstrong Learning. David, do you want to go ahead and get this conversation started?
Absolutely. Let's do that. Hi, everyone. My name is David Min. Let's take a look at Amazon Bedrock first. In this case, we are working on adding more customers and giving you more options, and start building and scaling your generative AI applications. And we're going to take a look at what options that are available for you to start building your apps. If you take a look at the offerings from AWS and Amazon from Amazon Bedrock, you're going to see the broad range of foundation models available. And when you have a single API to be able to consume these models, it gives you so much flexibility and the options to leverage these foundation models and be able to also customize these models based on your own data set, which is your crown jewel of your business. And we do that by providing the top security and privacy so you can offer responsible AI to end users. I'll pause here. Perhaps we can launch the poll question for your favorite models available from Bedrock. We have a total of 7 foundation model providers, AI21 Labs, Anthropic, Cohere, Meta, Mistral AI, Stability, and Amazon's own title models. Now, Meta and Mistral, really popular in open source community. We recently launched Llama 3 in line with the Meta's recent launch, as well as Claude 3, and the state-of-the-art model from Anthropic. And we can take a look at what options available for Anthropic as well. Now I'll pause here, give you a few seconds to respond. And then before we take a look, let's take a look at the Claude 3 model. So it's been really popular, it's been well received. And if you take a look at sort of small, medium, large, Haiku model, most performant, it's blazing fast performance with 200K context across Sonnet model and Opus. So if you're building sort of the low latency applications, perhaps you can start with Haiku. All models comes with vision capability, and you can take a look at the code structure, so you can pick and choose the right model for your use cases. Again, if you can respond to the poll question, we'd love to hear from you. From a SONET model and Opus, I think if you are solving the most complex problems with the large language model, SONET and Opus, there's an option so you can balance between the quality, performance, cost, and latency as well. Moving on, so within the context of a LaunchDarkly and LangChain, I have a quick post. You can take a look. There's a QR code. And also, it is from the original post from LaunchDarkly, the excellent writing on the LangChain integration. We see a lot of customers leveraging LangChain, open source framework, and many others. So we are constantly integrating these open source libraries along with LaunchDarkly, and you're going to find more information as well as the sample code as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to console to give you a quick tour of Amazon Bedrock. So if you come here to Amazon Bedrock landing page, let's get started. And you're going to be greeted with the foundation models and the model cards. And you can sort of pick and choose your models. Obviously, you want to be able to leverage the playground on the left-hand side. We have the chart models available, text, and then image models. Recently, we GA with the Titan image generator, as well as popular Stability AI, SDXL, options available. Now, you can start building your application with prompt engineering, retrieval augmented generation, even the fine-tuning. Now, when you get to the fine-tuning stage, we offer fully managed fine-tuning option. So you can either customize with fine-tuning for selected models, as well as continued pre-training options as well. So if you have a small set of labeled data for fine-tuning or large corpus of data for continuous pre-training, we have those options available for you. And we recently went preview for importing the open source models. So in addition to all the wide range of models available from 7 foundation model providers we looked at, you can also import some of the open source models and then start leveraging the single API integration with Bedrock, which is quite interesting. Now, obviously we have to do that in a responsible way. And so we've got the guardrails for Amazon Bedrock GA last week. We have the image models. We are able to detect the invisible watermark from Titan model. So we can also confirm that. Now, from a knowledge base, so knowledge bases for Amazon Bedrock, we offer fully managed retrieval augmented generation. So you don't have to manage your own vector database and embeddings models. So we can sort of give you that streamlined approach for that. Last but not least, agents for Amazon Bedrock. Now this offers fully managed autonomous agent capability. So you're able to sort of offload some of the heavy lift and focus on application building. And by the way, wide range of model selection. We want to be able to also evaluate. So there's an option for you to leverage model evaluation also when GA last week. So please do take a look. And we have most comprehensive services available for generative AI application development. So I would love to hear from you, your feedback, some of the inputs, and we'll continue to improve on our services. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Cody.
Thanks a lot, David. I'm going to go ahead and fire up my sharing now. Get sharing going. And there we go. So as thanks a lot, David, for the intro there, and also Cody. It's a little confusing because there's multiple of us, but we are a hive mind, as I always joke, and we work together well nicely. So My name's Cody. I look after product incubation at LaunchDarkly. And so what is that? That is how we introduce new capabilities, new services out into our customers. And we tend to bucket AI into this space because we really are in this like next generation of build, and platforms like Amazon Bedrock are making it so much easier for organizations to dive in and start using generative AI inside of their applications. I use Bedrock a ton because I really like the ability to pivot between all of these different models. And as we release these new foundational models, I can consume them inside of my applications really easily without having to completely restructure my application, install new adapters, new SDKs. I use the Bedrock SDK, and things are good to go. And so I'll show that later on in a demo. We'll get in a little bit and show just a small chat interface that I've built around this that'll really drive the point home. But LaunchDarkly has some really interesting ways of approaching the AI space overall. And in the next few slides that I'm going to go through, I'm going to take you through all of that now. One of the things I love the most about what's happening now inside of the space, and this is, we all have our things in tech that we're really passionate about, and I'm really passionate about lowering the bar for people to make it into tech. I think that what's really cool about AI is we've hit this scenario where there are so many more people entering into the software development space and in the space of building these large applications. And now we're at the spot where there's more people developing software now than ever before. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's an incredible community that we're building around this. And people are picking up coding for the first time in 1 week and shipping their next project by the end of that week. And I think that's really cool. And there's a lot of risks that come along with that too. But having a moment of like real positivity around this, I think that it's really cool to see how many people are in this space now as a result of what AI has done. I think what this tells me is that the barrier for entry has been completely reset. There's this wealth of availability of knowledge now. Everything's at your fingertips. It's very quick to get information, to learn how to do a thing, how to build a part of your application, how to extend it, how to add new capabilities in, how to introduce new things to your customers. All of these things are at our fingertips now. And so this availability of knowledge isn't about digging into Stack Overflow anymore and digging through different forum posts trying to find the right answer. You get so much in just a simple query. And there's obviously traps in there and the problems in there and holes that we fall into. But for the most part, it's a better experience. I think it's interesting if you go on social media or you go and look at a lot of like the tech news, we're seeing companies, again, start on a Friday, ship their first application by Monday, and end up being these huge businesses very, very quickly. Likewise, in the enterprise, we're seeing competition be completely reset. Organizations that are leaning in on AI are accelerating how they're able to differentiate from their competitors. And this is making the gap between businesses so much wider for the ones who are falling behind or not leaning in on this technology. And so there ends up being this tension between the idea of how we manage risk and how we build and innovate. I think I'm not going to go through everything on this page, but I think it's really interesting to think about how much we slow ourselves down to try and prevent something from going wrong. And I think this gets amplified inside of AI. We could adopt the newest model every day and tune our prompts every day and release all of these new capabilities. But there are times where it's very unpredictable. And there are times where you're expecting your customers to receive a very structured or specific response. And because you've gone too lax on your prompt configuration, you haven't set the right system parameters, ultimately you can go off the rails pretty fast. And so we go a lot slower. We're a lot more methodical. We test in smaller groups. We move slower. But at this time where everything is moving so much faster and competition is widening and all of these new capabilities are coming along quickly, and you want to be able to level this playing field, there's an obvious tension there between the two of those. I think we're at the point now where we can say that the next version of our applications that any of us release are going to be built with AI in some way, whether that's integrated inside of the application itself as like a chat bot or as something that analyzes data and returns back to your users, or that you're using as a developer to build alongside things like Bedrock to be able to build inside of your application with AI. Like AI is going to be present in everything we build from now moving forward. And so there's three kind of core truths that we think about at LaunchDarkly when we talk about AI. things like models, prompts are going to change, and they're going to change often. And that's where things like Bedrock really shine, because Bedrock becomes this single interface for multiple different models. And so when Llama 3 was released, I was able to quickly integrate that into my application without having to install a bunch of additional packages. I was able to use LaunchDarkly to control that model availability. And so we're going to get back to that in a few moments here. I think it's unrealistic to expect that the pace of model release is going to actually slow at all. I think individual vendors will slow their pace and will take time to release the next one. You know, we all joke about GPT-5. We joke about the next version of Anthropic Claude. But as they slow down, their competitors will be releasing the next model. And so the pace of model release is not going to slow, and the training data sets on these are only going to grow in size over time. The next truth is that organizations are going to be tuning the options of models around cost and the task at hand. So whether that's a knowledge worker who's just doing simple research, or a data scientist who's doing analysis, those are very different models, different prompts, different parameters. And so organizations are going to have to learn how to tune these on the fly and adjust the inputs and outputs based on who's actually working on AI in their space. And then ultimately, what we see the most is that people want to be able to quantify how successful these models and prompts are inside of their environment. So what does that look like from a token cost perspective versus user sentiment? Are we able to keep token costs low while increasing positive user sentiment inside of our applications? It's the most simple example, but it tends to be the one that resonates the most is, hey, how do I keep users happy while spending the least amount of money on generating tokens as possible? And so we think about what this translates to in order to be successful in building in this new age. We can't be blocked by deployments and testing new configurations. We have to have a smoother process for that. We can't say that in order to recover from a model that's gone wrong, I have to wait 30 minutes for my pipeline to run to roll it back, or I need to redeploy my application entirely to roll out a new capability. We just can't wait that long for it, especially when it comes like tuning prompts and adjusting what your actual real user traffic is going to see. We can't be buried behind deployments. We need the ability to control that running experience live, meaning I want to change the experience of a Cody who comes in versus a John who comes into the platform, and make sure that we're getting very different experiences based on the job that we have or the task we're trying to accomplish. We need to be able to build standardization around this. And then we need to be effectively gather and measure data against the way our users are actually interacting with our application. All of these are completely true regardless of which way you're consuming AI or how you're using it inside of your application. Everyone is going to need to be able to do these things. So when we think about the job of the AI engineer, and there's a lot of text on the slide. I'm not going to go through it all. There's a lot of jobs inside of this space that change as we start to look at how someone's building an AI, the ability to recover from model failures with data, the ability to target based off of specific parameters and make sure that they're getting a model configuration and a prompt configuration that aligns to what you expect. Being able to control that dynamic user experience, being able to configure measurement around things like conversion. If you're generating photos as part of your application, how do you track conversion of that? Meaning someone copies that photo to use elsewhere. Being able to have a platform that does that natively is going to be a big part of how people are building the next stage of applications, because if people are copying your photos more often from your application, that would imply that they are using it more, that they're getting better value out of it. If most people leave your page without ever copying the text or without ever saving the item, well, that tells you something, right? And so measurement, again, continues to be important. The ability to control the running experience of users is only going to grow. So going back to this tension between moving fast and keeping things safe, if you want to be able to do innovation and move a lot faster, there's two paths you can go. You can either slow way down, be very careful, which takes away from that speed, or you can make the act of introducing new capabilities and changes into your applications less scary. And we have a specific view on how we do this across a couple of different pillars. One, you should be able to release models, control them, control their availability, control which one is active for any given users right within the platform. You shouldn't have to do a redeployment every single time you want to make a change to that. You should be able to deploy new prompts at runtime, adjust those prompts, tune them, change them, again, without redeploying the application. This should just be something that is natively available to you. If there's a problem, you should be able to disable it and roll back to a previously known good configuration of model and prompt to ensure that users are going to have a predictable and, again, good user experience. You're going to need the ability to roll out these models progressively. I only want to roll out Claude 3 Haiku to my US West users first to make sure that they're having a good experience. And if I'm getting consistent results and positive user sentiment, I can increase that rollout across, the United States, into Europe, so on and so forth. I want to be able to let people opt into new betas, because you might be satisfied with the performance of, Claude 3 Haiku, but you might want to try out something like a Claude 3 Sonnet instead. So being able to offer that as a beta program and have people opt in and receive that model, and when they're done, opt back out if they're getting better results on Haiku, right? Having that opt in, opt out is how we start to give users the control over their experience to keep them living closer to where a better performance, better outcomes are going to come from. Being able to use those metrics to influence how rollouts are happening. So if you're getting a lot of hallucinations, if you're having model errors, I was messing with a photo application the other day and building a photo generator, and I kept running into, on a newer model, I kept running into errors in generation. It was obvious to me that this was a problem. If I'm getting this 60, 70% of the time, that's a bad user experience. I just want the system to roll me back to the previous one at that point. So how do I do that? I just saw a question come in. I glanced over. Do you find people actually do the work to opt out of betas, or do you just time out the access? This is a great question, and I've seen this go kind of both ways. I think the timeout is okay. I do find that specifically in like the LLM space, the model space, people will pretty generously engage and disengage with models. So if you go ahead and say, hey, I want to try out this different model for a little while as my default model and see how it performs, and it's a beta model that's been out, they will opt out if they're seeing consistently poor results. I've seen it pretty often. It's a little surprising, because I think that when you look at traditional application development, right, I roll out a new theme for my website, or I roll out a new login experience. I think people kind of fight through those. They're just like, it's going to come anyway, so I might as well just stick with the login interface now, because eventually they're going to roll it out anyways. But I think because of the conversational nature of LLMs and the way just the user interaction process goes, I think that people will opt out, I know for a fact people do end up opting out. People do end up bailing out and going to a different model, or saying, hey, I thought that 3 was going to be better, but 2 actually is more consistent for me. And so, yeah, it's a good question, Brittany, but I do definitely see people specifically in this space, they will opt in and out of these beta programs as needed. And then finally, going back to the measurement side of things, being able to optimize measurement across the entire stack, that's performance on the front end, how we're returning these results to people, how it's performing on the back end, how long does this query take to complete, what token usage looks like, how's user sentiment impacted, being able to A/B test inside of an AI space. And again, the most markety slide of my entire presentation, and so we will spend the least amount of time on this slide. We fell into this place where LaunchDarkly largely aligns to all of these pillars in a really interestingly unique way. And so a lot of the capabilities that we've built over the past several years really have tied directly into how people are releasing AI applications today. And so what you see here is kind of an overall view of the LaunchDarkly platform and how teams are using LaunchDarkly to collaborate across software releases. So how developers are building these new capabilities, how teams are targeting users to test out these new capabilities against, how we're rolling back and remediating changes when there's a problem inside of that environment, how we're progressively releasing to get it in front of more users, how we're measuring and then getting back into iteration after that. And this was a slide that we worked on jointly with our team at AWS. And I thought this was a really cool slide that really highlights kind of the 2 parallel paths that somebody developing a AI-based application is going to take, as well as somebody inside of LaunchDarkly is going to take. And so I think when you look at Bedrock is this incredible way to build and scale AI applications and LLMs inside of your products, because of the different models that are available and that common access point for consuming those different foundational models. But then LaunchDarkly gives you this wide range of control over your release, to be able to measure it, to be able to target users, to roll back if there's a problem, to progressively roll out. These are all things that just happen natively out of the box. And so when you step through this, you can see, somebody developing an AI application is going to be choosing their first models that they want to use. But when they interface with LaunchDarkly, they're able to create multiple different variations. And I'm going to show those in a moment. But being able to create multiple different variations of models that are available and switch between them on the fly, target users with them. Same thing goes for prompts, being able to control who's going to receive a given prompt at any time. Being able to connect in and optimize these configurations on the fly. Again, being able to release a new model and tune that prompt live with real user traffic is how you're going to make sure that these things are performing the way you want them to. And then again, the measurement side of that, being able to tie in all of these changes and understand what the performance impacts are and what does user sentiment look like. So kind of core jobs that I see people doing a lot using LaunchDarkly in the AI space. We see people using it to enable, disable new models, pivot them around different user groups, being able to target different segments of users with AI changes and make sure that they're getting the best experience possible. Iterating and optimizing their prompts aligned to those models. It's very common that new model releases and the prompt that you had before just doesn't work as well. And so you have to go in and retune that and make adjustments based on how that model is going to perform the best. And so being able to do that live inside of your application, again, with real user traffic is a very, very good thing. I keep harping on the measurement, but it comes up a lot. Being able to understand how responsive this is, how what your token usage is and the cost of that versus how your users are receiving your application. These are the 4 pillars that I see people most commonly using LaunchDarkly to build an AI with. And so here's an example of being able to roll out a different model provider. So here I've got a bunch of the configurations for, this is actually for a Bedrock based Anthropic model. And you see Claude Instant in there, but I'm rolling out Claude Sonnet as another variation below. And so being able to quickly switch between these 2 different models and have all these configurations here. So if I wanted to adjust the temperature or I wanted to adjust the top P rating, there's actually a typo in that wouldn't work out very well. Need to fix that. But being able to adjust top P or top K rating, it's a massive top K rating. It's not going to perform very well in general. But being able to tune these live and have them automatically update within the application again without redeploying it. Same thing goes for prompts. Here I've got a set of prompts for different use cases, and this is actually in the demo that I'm going to show here in a moment. But being able to roll out groups of prompts as JSON flags or just do a simple string-based flag and roll out several different prompts and target users with them. This is an example of being able to do that targeting. And again, I'm going to configure this from scratch inside of LaunchDarkly alongside this app. But being able to say, hey, my beta models are always going to go to Anthropic. My dev team is working on AI-21, and I'm rolling out Cohere to US West. Being able to control that all at once is pretty powerful, and be able to make those changes dynamically without having to call the network team to do some funky DNS tricks or throwing things behind a load balancer or throwing things behind some form of a gateway. I can control those all directly within the application live. Again, being able to measure the effectiveness of these different models and how they're represented from a success perspective. So in this example, which again I'll show inside of the app, being able to show Anthropic coming out ahead of the others because of conversion rates, things like that. So that was a lot of slide work. Let's jump into actual presentation content or our demo content now and make things a little bit more interesting. Let's get our app up. There we go. Great. And so this is a demo app that I use often whenever I'm doing these kind of AI-based demos. It's just a simple chat application. And so you can see if I go in, I can do show model usage, and we can see the Anthropic model is what's currently in use. I'll zoom this in just a little bit so we get a little bit better view for everybody. I can come in and ask it for things. So I live in Sacramento, so let's give me a 5-bullet list of information about Sacramento. It's going to go out and it's going to use Bedrock to query the Anthropic model, and it's eventually going to come back and give me a text response on the bottom around this. Pretty much the most useless AI application that's ever been written, but I get some facts in here, and that's great. And I like Sacramento, so I'm going to say it was a helpful response. And so this, this chat app is running. It's active on my local computer, but I could deploy this out and have it running no problem. If I switch over into LaunchDarkly, I can see I have a couple of different flags in play here. All of them are currently off. Let's start off with something like the model provider flag. And so I've got a couple of different models that are available here. You can see I have a split going between 3 different models. That is currently the default rule. So if I was to just refresh this application and go back in, every so often it'll actually cycle out to a different model. Actually, we'll turn this on so that we actually get the default rule going, and then we'll see the cycling. There we go. So we saw it update live to the Courier model. Again, if I reset AI21, and it'll keep cycling through every time I refresh the application. And so 33% of the time it's moving between different models. That's like a progressive rollout. It's not entirely realistic unless you wanted to measure 3 different ones at the same time, in which case there's a lot of value in this. Most of the time people are going to be choosing which one they want to go to next and bumping that percentage as we go. And so I've got this configured. It's rolling out different ones. This is not the most detailed model example ever. I'm handling a lot of this in code, but again, I could come in and do those JSON-based flags to handle all the configurations in here if I wanted to. I can easily come in and add different types of rules. So for example, I have these different segments. If I go into my segment list, we can see I have one for my QA team, for developers. I have the beta models segment. All of these control different groups of users. And so if I wanted to come in and say, I want inside of my model provider to have a segment targeted that says, let's make this a little bigger for readability's sake. My US West team is going to receive the Anthropic model. I could turn this on right now, have the application update live. I don't have to call a bunch of teams to implement that. I can do that natively right inside of the application live at runtime, which is a pretty useful thing, all things considered. So again, being able to control the model, that's what we showed there. I'll back out of this now. We'll leave that alone for now. We'll come back to it eventually. Let's take a look at something like this, like the AI prompt availability. Go ahead and delete this rule out. We don't need that right now. We'll come back to that in a bit. So right now I'm running these. If I could come in, turn this on, save the change, and nothing's going to change inside of the app yet. But because targeting is now on, I could come in, edit this, and switch it. Let's say I want to do some code research instead. I can save this change just as fast, come back in, and we can see new prompts are available. So I can come in and say, write me a hello world application. Submit it. It's going to go out to AI21 and pull down a response successfully. And so there we go. Yay. Does it work? Does it work? Is it a real hello world? Yeah, I guess it qualifies. So we'll go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Yay. So now I've rolled out different prompts. I could come in just as easily and create a new one, right? So you can imagine, what if I wanted to complete a completely different new section? I could copy this existing one, add a variation. Instead of travel information here, I could come in and say something like, I don't know, LaunchDarkly help. Paste this in and start to edit that prompt. So this one is a traveling between destinations one. I could say basic LaunchDarkly help. We could edit our prompt a little bit more. Play the role of a LaunchDarkly support engineer. And I'll clean this out. And we'll say just something basic like, help me with stuff in a funny tone. And we'll just clip this other one off. We don't need to have multiple ones. So that prompt is now available. I can save this. We can see I get a nice little change log. I could request an approver if I wanted to, but I don't need to. So we will go back, leave that off. We'll save our change. No changes inside of the app yet because we haven't activated that. But if I was to go in and do my targeting and change this, I now have that LaunchDarkly help option available. I can save this, and there's our LaunchDarkly help. I want to build in React with LaunchDarkly. I could send that out. It's going to use that new prompt. If I felt like it wasn't working right, I could go in and tune that. This isn't a very helpful response. Obviously, my prompt wasn't really very good, but I'm going to say it was not helpful just because I could use a little bit more detail than that. Again, so I showed being able to roll out the new prompt live, make it available to users. So that was easy to roll out. You can see as I was going through this, though, I've been switching between different things manually. What if I wanted to implement a beta program, like I talked before about? The question in the audience came up. I have this self-service model adoption flag. So if I go up here, we can see nothing's in there. But if I go in and now turn this on, we can see a new menu appear for enabling a beta segment. Behind the scenes, this is controlling something called a LaunchDarkly context. LaunchDarkly contexts are how we do targeting. And so in this case, when I use this enable beta model, I get this thing or part of a context that allows me to set a in beta flag on that context item. So if I came in here, I have this beta model flag that is currently set to false. When I enable that beta or opt into that beta, I will have that change to true. And so I can do targeting off of that. So I have a segment in here for my beta users, this beta models feature. If user beta model is true, it goes to all targets. And so now I could come in and say, inside of my model provider, I want to add a new rule that targets a segment. If they're in the beta model segment, I want to roll out the Anthropic model to them. Save this change. And I also want to do the same thing for my model availability. And so if they're in the beta model segment, I want them to get the code research functionality. So everyone else will get help, but the people inside of this will get the code research one. So now when I go in and enable beta model, we can see it updates instantly. And I get that setting here automatically. So this would happen for everyone who's connected to the system at any given time. If I was rolling this out to US West, everybody in the West Coast would receive this update at the exact same moment. That's a big part of how our architecture is built to enable that. And so I felt like that wasn't working. Going back to the opting out thing, I could disable that model. And now I'm back to the same defaults for the environment. So now we've shown rolling out different models, changing models live, doing targeting around them, progressive rollouts of models. We've shown the same thing for prompts, adding a new prompt, changing the targeting around it, adding users to that target. We've shown being able to combine these into a beta opt-in program so people can opt into new AI capabilities inside of our products. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the measurement side of things. So I'll come in and I'm going to delete these rules out because I don't need them anymore. So I'll delete that, go back to my model provider, and we'll delete out this beta program here. And now if I go into experiments, we can see I have an experiment that exists around LLM conversion that's currently stopped. This metric is this experiment is powered by a couple of metrics, things like satisfied user and unsatisfied user. So thumb up versus thumb down. Going back in, we'll start that experiment up. So we'll start this experiment. And now as users interact with our application, we'll be measuring how they are actually, how their user sentiment is. So if I go in and ask this again, we wait for a response, takes a little bit longer. Might be the exact same one again because of caching. Oh, see, this is a little bit more helpful. We get some code in here. We get a little docs action. So we'll say that's helpful. Clicking that button sends an event to LaunchDarkly that says, hey, this user was satisfied in this configuration. And so now when I go into results, it takes a few to populate, so it's not showing right now. I would see that one user has come in and is hitting that AI 21. And for me, it was a thumbs up. If I go to iterations, we can see previous runs that I've done. So let's go take a look at this older one, see if we get a little bit more data out of an older run. We had some in here. And we can see I was running through a couple of examples. And in this one, after several queries inside of the environment, I get a probability that AI 21 was performing the best out of these options. But the most unsatisfied users were using the Cohere model in this case. Now, we're talking about a sample size here of 38 people. That's a really poor measurement. There's not really enough there to truly gauge how well that's doing. So let's not hold that too far against Cohere at this point. But we can see early indications that in this case, AI 21 was performing really well. And so all within the same platform, we were able to handle things like rolling out these new capabilities, changing models, changing prompts, changing targets, beta programs, measurement. And we see this as the full life cycle of how people are going to roll out and develop AI applications. They're going to need to be able to control the experience of every user. They need to be able to operate at runtime. They need measurement to be a native workflow that lives alongside the way they release those changes inside of the environment. And LaunchDarkly does all of that out of the box. And so that is the demo that I have for everyone today. I think we're ready to open up for questions. David, what'd you think of that? Did you enjoy the demo?
Yeah, it was really good. There was actually a question about when user responds with "I'm not helpful." Does it also reflect in your report?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Love that. And we kind of breezed through that. But you'll see down here, I have two metrics attached to this experiment. I have a satisfied user there, and I have a secondary metric of unsatisfied user. So this will track both of those metrics. So if I do a little thumbs down action, that translates to an unsatisfied user in my code and increases this scoring, whereas a satisfied user results in the positive scoring. So yeah, in this case, I'm tracking both. These are both metrics that I have inside of LaunchDarkly configured. So an unsatisfied user is managed here. So
interesting.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Steve also asked about additional features being available. So if you can take a look at it, that'd be great.
Let me take a look. I'm just reading the question. We have Atlassian, according to case study, LaunchDarkly helps Atlassian in terms of ability to separate code deployments from feature releases. However, we did not find any differences using the app. Is there anything we have to pay for in order to see those new features? Yeah, so when we talk about the idea of separating code deployment from feature releases, a lot of what we're talking about there is this whole targeting concept, right? So we're used to this world where when we ship code, typically, when it finishes shipping, it's released, right? So I build my new application, I deploy it out to my users, it finishes deploying, I call IT and say, hey, the deployment's done, flip DNS back on, and everyone connects to the new application. And that's how a lot of people deploy applications and release them today. But when you use something like LaunchDarkly, we separate that process out. And so now you can do this code deployment, have targeting turned on, and have all those new capabilities totally disabled. But when you're ready to turn it on, so say you want to test against your developer team, you can go in and say, my developer team has this on, it's off for everybody else. Now you've deployed the code, but only released it to this subset. And so we've separated that code deployment from software feature release process. And so that's what we talk about, especially in the Atlassian case, like you highlighted in there. I see Karthik asking, so unsatisfied user metrics trigger any specific retraining of the model, trying to understand if not useful data is being used. Oh, so you're talking, got it. This is, so your question is around model training. And so what do we do with that not useful data? Sure. So we don't necessarily cover the retraining aspect of this. You could, inside of your application, trigger something that would go off and fire a retraining and say, hey, when I got content back like this, I need to update either my embeddings if I'm doing that natively myself, or I need to help start retraining another model. So I catalog this into a data store somewhere that I can use later to retrain. You could definitely write that logic in and do that inside of the application off of that unsatisfied event. So when someone clicks that button, do something with it. But that's not something that we handle out of the box today. You would obviously handle that inside of your code, like natively or in a customized way.
Cody, so I think one thing I can also think is that, when we extract the, bad interaction, right? So then you can have a sort of separate pipeline to analyze it through some sort of automated process, right? And then be able to update your system prompt. And, I think we can sort of make the application continuous learn from the user interactions and then improve on the quality. So
totally. we have this another thing that we have is like this thing called release guardian, and that will let you, so if you're getting continuously negative prompts, so like let's use we'll do this on the fly. This was not a part of the actual demo, so we're going to hope that we don't break it. Oh, it's actually not set up in this environment, so I can't show it anyways. Well, we'll see. I could go into something like my my model provider, and I can actually add a metric to this, and I can say I want to measure satisfied and unsatisfied users as part of this rollout. And so I'll disable this real quick. We'll turn it back on. I could then come in and I could say, actually, that's not going to work. We are going to do this on a different one real quick. That one's a bad example to do this with. Let's say we're doing it with a prompt. I could come in and say, I'm going to measure satisfied and unsatisfied users against my prompts that I'm rolling out. And what I want to do is I want to monitor that and take action if those metrics either breach. So meaning if my satisfied users reduces below the baseline or my unsatisfied users increase above the baseline, I can have Release Guardian manage that for me inside of the application. Messing around with things on the fly here that aren't helpful. But what'll happen is if those metrics are breached, it'll automatically roll back to the previous version. And so we can handle some level of automation around this in there to manage kind of the state of a feature based off of metrics that are coming into an environment. So we start to get some better intelligence and some automated action there. Any other questions coming through? Checking chat. I see nothing in there. I see Mark in chat. If we interact with the LaunchDarkly site that has a good start on features and functions that we desire, is there an option to pay to utilize their configuration just to jumpstart a development environment? That is a bit more of a complex question because so we do have some like samples inside of our docs around like implementations that are out there. I don't think that you could necessarily go to like a customer and say, I mean, I'm sure some customers would sell their configurations if they could. But I would definitely check out some of our sample applications, Mark. I think that those would probably help you out. You can reach out to me also or through a survey or through the feedback form, and I can help you find some stuff. Awesome. Well, this was great. I really enjoyed coming through today. It's always fun spending time with AWS and other Cody, or am I the other Cody? I don't know which one of us is the primary Cody here. All right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing. This was a great one. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Awesome. Well, Cody and David, it has been an absolute pleasure here having you with us. And the amount of content you were able to cover here in about 45 minutes, incredible. Looks like we've got a Cody in the audience as well. So welcome to the Hive Mind, Cody S.
So many of us. We're everywhere. We are Legion.
You can't get away from us. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. A couple of notes before I officially release you. Today's session was recorded, and we will be sending you an email with access to the recording. We'll be sending that out to you here shortly. I'll also remind everyone that we will be sending out 2 $50 Amazon gift cards. So thank you for your chats and your questions. Those have made you eligible for this giveaway. If you wouldn't mind filling out that survey that is pinned to the top of the chat as well as in the handouts, that'll make you eligible, but it'll also help us work to improve our programming as we're always looking to do. So I'd like to thank AWS and LaunchDarkly for sponsoring this program. And to everyone here, thank you so much for being here. We hope to see you at a future Techstrong learning experience, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again to Cody and David.
Thank you both for having me.
Thank you.